stones, metals and gems. Each of the four primary elements as taught by the early philosophers has its analogue in the quaternary terrestrial constitution of man. The rocks and earth correspond to the bones and flesh, the water to the various fluids, the air to the gases, and the fire to the bodily heat. Since the bones are the framework that sustains the corporeal structure, they may be regarded as a fitting emblem of the spirit, the divine foundation which supports the composite fabric of mind, soul, and body. To the initiate, the skeleton of death holding in bony fingers the reaper's scythe denotes Saturn Kronos, the father of the gods, carrying the sickle with which he mutilated Uranos, his own sire. In the language of the mysteries, the spirits of men are the powdered bones of Saturn. The latter deity was always worshipped under the symbol of the base or footing, inasmuch as he was considered to be the substructure upholding creation. The myth of Saturn has its historical basis in the fragmentary records preserved by the early Greeks and Phoenicians concerning a king by the name who ruled over the ancient continent of Hyperborea. Polaris, Hyperborea, and Atlantis, because they lie buried beneath the continents and oceans of the modern world, have frequently been symbolized as rocks supporting upon their broad surfaces new lands, races, and empires. According to the Scandinavian mysteries, the stones and cliffs were formed from the bones of Ymir, the primordial giant of the seething clay, while to the Hellenic mystics the rocks were the bones of the Great Mother, g. After the deluge sent by the gods to destroy mankind at the close of the Iron Age, only Deucalion and Pyrrha were left alive. Entering a ruined sanctuary to pray, they were directed by an oracle to depart from the temple and with heads veiled and garments unbound cast behind them the bones of their mother. Construing the cryptic message of the god to mean that the earth was the great mother of all creatures, Deucalion picked up loose rocks and, bidding Pyrrha do likewise, cast them behind him. From these rocks there sprang forth a new and stalwart race of human beings, the rocks thrown by Deucalion becoming men and those thrown by Pyrrha becoming women. In this allegory is epitomized the mystery of human evolution. For spirit, by ensouling matter, becomes that indwelling power which gradually but sequentially raises the mineral to the status of the plant to the plane of the animal to the dignity of man, and man to the estate of the gods. The solar system was organized by forces operating inward from the great ring of the Saturnian sphere. And since the beginnings of all things were under the control of Saturn, the most reasonable inference is that the first forms of worship were dedicated to him and his peculiar symbol, the stone. Thus the intrinsic nature of Saturn is synonymous with that spiritual rock which is the enduring foundation of the solar temple, and has its antitype or lower octave in that terrestrial rock, the planet Earth, which sustains upon its jagged surface the diversified genera of mundane life. Although its origin is uncertain, litholatry undoubtedly constitutes one of the earliest forms of religious expression. Throughout all the world, writes Godfrey Higgins, the first object of idolatry seems to have been a plain, unroot stone, placed in the ground, as an emblem of the generative or procreative powers of nature. See the Celtic Druids. Remnants of stone worship are distributed over the greater part of the earth's surface, a notable example being the menhirs at Carnac, in Brittany, where several thousand gigantic uncut stones are arranged in 11 orderly rows. Many of these monoliths stand over 20 feet out of the sand in which they are embedded, and it has been calculated that some of the larger ones weigh as much as 250,000 pounds. By some it is believed that certain of the menhirs mark the location of buried treasure, but the most plausible view is that which regards Carnac as a monument to the astronomical knowledge of antiquity. Scattered throughout the British Isles and Europe, these cairns, dolmens, menhirs, and schist veins stand as mute but eloquent testimonials to the existence and achievements of races now extinct. Of particular interest are the rocking or Logan stones, which evince the mechanical skill of these early peoples. These relics consist of enormous boulders poised upon one or two small points in such a manner that the slightest pressure will sway them, but the greatest effort is not sufficient to overthrow them. These were called living stones by the Greeks and Latins, the most famous one being the Jagorian stone in the Strait of Gibraltar. Though so perfectly balanced that it could be moved with the stalk of a daffodil, this rock could not be upset by the combined weight of many men. There is a legend that Hercules raised a rocking stone over the graves of the two sons of Boreas whom he had killed in combat. This stone was so delicately poised that it swayed back and forth with the wind, but no application of force could overturn it. A number of Logan stones have been found in Britain, traces of one no longer standing having been discovered in Stonehenge. See the Celtic Druids. It is interesting to note that the green stones forming the inner ring of Stonehenge are believed to have been brought from Africa. In many cases the monoliths are without carving or inscription, for they undoubtedly antedate both the use of tools and the art of writing. In some instances the stones have been trued into columns or obelisks, as in the runic monuments and the Hindu lingams and Sakti stones. In other instances they are fashioned into rough likenesses of the human body, as in the Easter Island statues, or into the elaborately sculptured figures of the Central American Indians and the Khmers of Cambodia. The first rough stone images can hardly be considered as effigies of any particular deity but rather as the crude effort of primitive man to portray in the enduring qualities of stone the procreative attributes of abstract divinity. An instinctive recognition of the stability of deity has persisted through all the intervening ages between primitive man and modern civilization. Ample proof of the survival of litholatry in the Christian faith is furnished by allusions to the Rock of Refuge, the rock upon which the Church of Christ was to be founded, the cornerstone which the builders rejected, Jacob's stony pillow which he set up and anointed with oil, the sling stone of David, the rock Moriah upon which the altar of King Solomon's temple was erected, the white stone of Revelation, and the Rock of Ages. Stones were highly venerated by prehistoric peoples primarily because of their usefulness. Jagged bits of stone were probably man's first weapons. Rocky cliffs and crags constituted his first fortifications, and from these vantage points he hurled loose boulders down upon marauders. In caverns or rude huts fashioned from slabs of rock the first humans protected themselves from the rigors of the elements. Stones were set up as markers and monuments to primitive achievement. They were also placed upon the graves of the dead, probably as a precautionary measure to prevent the depredations of wild beasts. During migrations, it was apparently customary for primitive peoples to carry about with them stones taken from their original habitat. As the homeland or birthplace of a race was considered sacred, these stones were emblematic of that universal regard shared by all nations for the place of their geniture. The discovery that fire could be produced by striking together two pieces of stone augmented man's reverence for stones, but ultimately the hitherto unsuspected world of wonders opened by the newly discovered element of fire caused pyrrholatry to supplant stone worship. The dark, cold father, stone, gave birth out of itself to the bright, glowing sun fire. And the newly born flame, by displacing its parent, became the most impressive and mysterious of all religio-philosophic symbols, widespread and enduring through the ages. Insert. Saturn swallowing the stone substituted for Jupiter. From Catraries Immagini degli dei degli Anici. Saturn, having been warned by his parents that one of his own children would dethrone him, devoured each child at birth. At last Rhea, his wife, in order to save Jupiter, her sixth child substituted for him a rock enveloped in swaddling clothes, which Saturn, ignorant of the deception practiced upon him, immediately swallowed. Jupiter was concealed on the island of Crete until he attained manhood, when he forced his father to disgorge the 5 children he had eaten. The stone swallowed by Saturn in lieu of his youngest son was placed by Jupiter at Delphi, where it was held in great veneration and was daily anointed. Continued. The body of everything was like unto a rock, trued either into a cube or more ornately chiseled to form a pedestal, while the spirit of everything was like unto the elaborately carved figure surmounting it. Accordingly, altars were erected as a symbol of the lower world, and fires were kept burning upon them to represent that spiritual essence illuminating the body it surmounted. The square is actually one surface of a cube, its corresponding figure in plane geometry, and its proper philosophic symbol. Consequently, when considering the earth as an element and not as a body, the Greeks, Brahmins, and Egyptians always referred to its 4 corners, although they were fully aware that the planet itself was a sphere. Because their doctrines were the sure foundation of all knowledge and the first step in the attainment of conscious immortality, the mysteries were often represented as cubical or pyramidal stones. Conversely,